Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cutting through all the noise. The algorithms, the balance sheets, all that intimidating math to get to the heart of finance.
Yeah, we're going deep on the human element, the psychology of money.
Exactly.
And our mission for you today is pretty straightforward. We want to show that long-term success with money has surprisingly little to do with your IQ.
Or your technical skills.
Right. It has everything to do with your behavior. It's a soft skill, one we almost never teach, but it's absolutely the deciding factor. We treat finance too much like physics, like it has these hard and fast rules.
When it's really more like psychology.
It's all psychology, full of nuance, emotion, and, well, personal history.
Okay, let's just jump right into that with two stories from the source material that are just polar opposites. They really highlight this behavioral gap.
Yeah, they're perfect. So on one side, you have this incredibly successful tech executive, a certified genius. I mean, this guy designed and patented a key component that's in basically every Wi-Fi router.
So, a genuine success story. Made a ton of money.
A ton. But what he didn't have was any emotional control. No maturity at all when it came to that money.
It was this toxic mix of arrogance and deep insecurity. This is the kind of guy who would literally pull out bricks of cash in a party just to brag.
And then there's the famous story where he convinces his friends to take $1,000 gold coins and just sip them across the Pacific Ocean.
Just for a laugh.
Yeah. I mean, it's just shocking financial recklessness. So the ending is kind of inevitable. Despite his massive income and his genius-level intellect, he went completely broke.
His knowledge was a 10, but his behavioral intelligence was a 0.
Exactly. Now, compare him to Ronald Read.
You couldn't invent a better contrast.
Yeah.
Ronald Read was this humble guy from rural America. He worked at a gas station for 25 years, fixing cars.
And after that, he swept floors at JCPenney for another 17 years.
He lived a simple life. Bought a 2-bedroom house for $12,000 when he was in his late 30s.
And yet, when he died in '92, this former janitor was in headlines all over the world.
Not from a lottery win, right?
No, not at all. It was because he'd built a net worth of over $8 million.
$8 million? How?
The secret was, in hindsight, just astonishingly simple. He just saved what little he could, and he invested it consistently in blue-chip stocks for decades. He just let time do the work.
So the janitor on a minimum wage job completely outperformed the highly educated, super successful executive.
It's a contrast you just don't see in other fields.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd never expect a janitor to perform a heart transplant better than a Harvard-trained surgeon.
But of course not.
But in investing, it happens all the time. Because success is really rooted in discipline and endurance, not just your smarts.
So that's our mission today. We want to explore why this happens in finance and how focusing on these behavioral skills can help you make better decisions no matter what your income is.
Let's start with a really foundational idea, and it can be a bit controversial. The idea that in finance, no one is crazy.
What do you mean by that? Because some decisions look pretty crazy from the outside.
They do. But what we mean is that every decision, no matter how baffling it looks to us, makes perfect sense to the person making it. It's all filtered through their own unique personal history with money.
That's a powerful idea. So what looks insane to me is actually perfectly rational to someone else because our experiences are so different.
Exactly. Our personal experience with money, which is just a tiny, tiny fraction of global economic history.
Like 0.0000000000001% or something.
Right. That tiny sliver makes up about 80% of how we view the world and how we think about risk.
It's not about intelligence then. It's just dumb luck of when and where you grew up.
Absolutely. Take the stock market. If you were born in, say, 1970, the S&P 500 went up almost 10 times inflation adjusted during your teens and 20s.
Your most impressionable years.
Right. So your core belief is that stocks are this incredible engine for growth. But if you were born just 20 years earlier, in 1950, the market basically went nowhere during those same years.
So you have two equally smart people, but their view on risk is just completely different.
And it's anchored emotionally just based on the decade they were born. We see it with inflation, too. If you were born in 1960, you saw prices triple in your youth. You remember the gas lines, you felt that pain.
So for you, inflation is this visceral, immediate threat.
But if you were born in 1990, you've mostly seen low, stable inflation. It just doesn't register as a real threat. Your entire approach to spending and saving is different.
This really comes into focus when you look at the lottery paradox. Americans spend more money on lottery tickets than on movies, music, video games, sporting events, and books.
Combined.
Combined, it's staggering. And the data shows The lowest income households spend about $412 a year on the lotto, 4 times what the highest income group spend.
And here's the really frustrating part. The people spending over $400 a year on lotto tickets are often the very same people who say they can't come up with $400 for an emergency.
Okay, on a spreadsheet, that is just completely irrational.
It is. The math is terrible.
But hold on, I have to push back a little. If the math is so clearly bad, isn't there a point where we have to say some decisions are just bad, regardless of the context?
And that's the critical point. We're not saying the decision is good, but we're saying the logic behind it is, well, tragically reasonable to the person buying the ticket.
How so?
Well, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, the idea of saving, say, $5,000 for a down payment feels impossible. It's a fantasy.
Okay.
But buying a $2 ticket, that's the only time that person gets to hold a tangible, immediate dream of getting all the good stuff that other people just take for granted.
So they're not really paying for the odds. They're paying for a feeling.
Exactly. They're paying for a week of hope for the price of a coffee. It's not a spreadsheet calculation, it's an emotional one. And understanding that is the first step.
Okay, so if our personal histories justify our crazy behaviors, how do we account for the huge external forces we can't control? The things that can blow up even the best plans. I'm talking about luck and risk.
Right. Luck and risk are siblings. And they're essential to understand because they prove that nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems. There are always outside forces at play.
The story of Bill Gates and his friend Kent Evans just illustrates this perfectly. Gates is obviously a genius, but he also had this 1-in-a-million stroke of luck.
He did. He went to Lakeside School, which in 1968 was one of the only high schools in the world that had a computer.
In the world.
That single bit of luck gave him and his friends a massive head start in a field that was about to change everything.
And his best friend, Kent Evans, was, by all accounts, his intellectual equal. They were completely obsessed with this new computer world, working together constantly.
They were on the exact same path. But Kent Evans got the other side of that coin. He experienced 1-in-a-million risk. He died in a mountaineering accident just before they graduated high school.
Wow. The same magnitude of randomness, just
Wow.
one positive, one tragic.
And that's why it's so hard to judge financial success. We want to believe it's all skill. We tend to ignore luck because, well, it's hard to measure. And frankly, it feels a little rude to tell someone they just got lucky.
Right.
But the danger is that we end up trying to copy what looks like skill when it might have just been random luck. You look at someone like Cornelius Vanderbilt, whose early success was built on flaunting laws and taking huge risks that could have easily ruined him.
And because he won, we now call it bold vision.
You call it wisdom, but the line between bold and reckless is often only visible in hindsight.
And when you start thinking your success is all skill and not luck, that's when the ego takes over, that feeling of never enough.
Yes. That brings us to people like Rajat Gupta. He's the former CEO of McKinsey, worth about $100 million. By any definition, he'd won the game.
But it wasn't enough?
He desperately wanted to be a billionaire. So he risked his reputation, his freedom, everything on insider trading. He made that famous call just 16 seconds after he got off the phone with Warren Buffett.
Or Bernie Madoff. He had a legitimate, incredibly successful business making him, $25 to $50 million a year?
He had it all. The respect, the wealth, and he threw it away for a Ponzi scheme.
Why?
It's that psychological trap. Warren Buffett said it best when he was talking about the collapse of long-term capital management. He said, to make money they didn't have and didn't need, they risked what they did have and did need. And that's foolish.
That's it right there. Risking what you need for something you don't.
The quest for more just pushes you right past contentment into total regret.
And the antidote to that, the solution, seems to be this idea of time, compounding, and just survival.
That is the whole game. You look at Warren Buffett's success, and it's not really because he's the single greatest investor ever. It's overwhelmingly tied to his longevity. His secret is time.
Compounding is so counterintuitive, isn't it? The results just don't feel linear.
They don't. Think about this. If Buffett had started investing later, say at age 30 with 25 grand, and then retired at 60, even with his amazing returns, his net worth today would be 99.9% less than it is.
99.9% less.
The vast majority of his wealth came after he qualified for Social Security. That just proves that sticking around and letting time work is the real driver.
And sticking around requires a different skill set than getting rich in the first place.
They're completely different. Getting money often takes optimism, taking big risks, but keeping money, That requires the opposite. It requires humility, frugality, and a healthy dose of paranoia.
You have to accept that luck played a role and that it can be taken away just as fast.
You do. Just look at the 1929 crash. You have Jesse Livermore, who famously made the equivalent of over $3 billion shorting the market. A legend.
But then what happened?
4 years later, he'd lost it all. Overconfidence, massive debt, reckless bets. He eventually took his own life. He was great at getting wealthy, but terrible at staying wealthy.
Which is why survival has to be the cornerstone of any financial plan.
Absolutely. The goal is to be financially unbreakable because endurance is what lets compounding do its magic over decades.
So if you build a strategy around that kind of durability, what is the actual payoff? What's the highest dividend money can buy you?
It's not the fancy car. It's not the big house. It's control over your time, the ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want.
There was that psychologist, Angus Campbell, who found that controlling your life is a way better predictor of happiness than your salary or how prestigious your job is.
That's it. That's the ultimate goal.
But the irony is we so often spend money on visible things to try and get that respect and control, and it backfires, the man in the car paradox.
It's the classic mistake. When you see someone drive by in a really nice car, you rarely think, wow, that person driving is so cool.
No, you think, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool.
Exactly. The purchase is meant to earn respect, but all it really generates is envy in others. It's a low-yield strategy.
So we have to get our definitions straight. What's the difference between being rich and being wealthy?
It all comes down to visibility. Being rich is visible. It's a high current income that lets you afford the payments on the Ferrari. Wealth, on the other hand, is hidden. It's the income you didn't spend. It's the financial assets that haven't been turned into stuff yet.
So wealth is defined by restraint.
That's a great way to put it. The guy driving the Ferrari is rich. But your quiet neighbor with the 3-year-old Toyota who has millions in the bank, that's the person who is truly wealthy.
Because they have options. They have flexibility.
They have independence, which leads to the advice. You should save for the sake of saving.
Not just for a specific goal like a car or a house.
Precisely. That unearmarked savings, that's what gives you control over your time. It's your hedge against all of life's surprises. It lets you endure the bad times without being forced to sell your investments or take a job you hate.
Okay, so if the goal is long-term endurance, we have to accept that being reasonable is way more important than being coldly rational.
Yes. This is so important. We make financial decisions at the dinner table, under stress, not in a sterile lab with a spreadsheet. Aiming for the mathematically perfect, rational decision is often completely unreasonable for an actual human being.
The best example is Harry Markowitz. He literally won a Nobel Prize for creating the mathematical model for risk and return.
The pinnacle of rationality. But for his own money, he just chose a simple 50-50 split between stocks and bonds.
Why?
Because his goal wasn't to maximize his returns. His goal was to minimize his future regret. He knew he could stick with that simple plan no matter what the market did. That's a reasonable plan.
And you contrast that with something like that Yale study that suggested young investors use 2-to-1 margin on stocks.
Which is mathematically rational, right? The long-term odds are in your favor, but it's absurdly unreasonable. It risks a total wipeout.
No normal person could stick with a plan after losing 100% of their retirement savings in a bad decade.
Of course not. So the rational plan you can't actually follow is way worse than the reasonable one you can.
And to stick with any plan, you have to be willing to pay the price of admission. You don't get those compounding returns for free.
Nothing is free. The S&P 500 has produced life-changing returns, but the price is chronic volatility. Look at a stock like Netflix. Over its history, it traded below its previous all-time high on 94% of days.
94%. If you were only focused on the short-term pain, you would have sold 1,000 times.
Which requires a huge mental shift. You have to stop looking at volatility and uncertainty as a fine like a penalty for doing something wrong.
Because that's what causes panic selling.
Right. Instead, you have to see it as a fee. It's the price you pay for a good outcome. It's like the ticket price at Disneyland. You pay it because you know the long-term ride is worth the cost of getting in the door.
So if we pull all of this together, respecting luck, curbing your ego, surviving, valuing time, being reasonable, what is the final, most complex psychological lesson we need to get our heads around?
It's what's called the historians as prophets fallacy. We study financial history to understand human behavior, greed, and fear are constant. But history is a terrible map for the future.
Why is that?
Because The biggest, most important events that actually move the needle are always unprecedented. They're what we call tail events.
Things like the Great Depression, 9/11, the invention of vaccines, things you couldn't have predicted by just looking at the past.
Exactly. They are total surprises. The future will be full of things that history gives us no guide for.
So let's bring this home for the listener. The only forecast that's always right is that the world will keep surprising us. So what practical step can you take to make sure your financial plan can survive the risks you can't even imagine?
You have to build in a margin of safety, room for error. There's this incredible story from the Battle of Stalingrad, the German tanks, the most advanced military hardware in the world at the time.
Yeah.
They were rendered completely useless, not by enemy fire, but because field mice had nested inside them and eaten through the electrical wiring.
Field mice. An utterly unforeseeable risk.
That's the perfect analogy for finance. You can plan for recessions, for market dips, for all the known risks. But you also have to save for the financial equivalent of field mice eating the wiring.
You save for the things you can't possibly predict.
And that endurance, that margin of safety, is what lets compounding work its wonders. The goal is simple. Just survive so you have a chance to succeed.
That's the deep dive.